hospital lobby was bright with white lights, and the constant sound of footsteps, ringing phones, and rolling stretchers made the air heavy. Mary walked slowly through the entrance, holding her stomach with both hands. Each step felt like she was climbing a mountain. She had been feeling sick for more than a day, but tonight the pain was sharp, pressing through her body like fire. Her friend Emma supported her by the arm. "You'll be fine, Mary," Emma whispered. "We just need to get you to a doctor," Mary nodded weakly. Her lips were pale and sweat was forming on her forehead. She wanted to believe Emma's words, but deep inside, fear was building. At the reception desk, a nurse looked up. "Name?" she asked. "Mary," she said softly. "Please, I can't stand." "My stomach hurts so much." The nurse wrote something on a paper. "Take a seat in the waiting area. The doctor will call you soon." Mary wanted to argue, but her strength was gone. Emma guided her to a chair in the waiting area. The chairs were lined in a row, and several other patients sat with tired faces. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant, mixed with the sound of television news playing in the background. Mary closed her eyes and leaned against the chair. Every breath hurt. She prayed silently that someone would come quickly. Minutes passed. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Emma noticed patients being called one after another. A young man with a sprained arm was taken inside within 10 minutes. A woman with a cough was guided to an examination room in less than half an hour. Mary, however, continued to sit, curling into herself in pain. Emma stood up and went to the desk. "Excuse me," she said firmly. "My friend is in severe pain. Could you please check when the doctor will see her?" The nurse gave her a tired smile. "She's on the list. The doctor will call her soon." Emma returned to Mary, trying to hide her worry. She squeezed Mary's hand. "Hold on. They'll call you soon." But the truth was, Emma was beginning to lose faith. At last, the sound of footsteps echoed as a tall doctor entered the waiting room. His white coat swung lightly as he walked, and he carried a clipboard in his hand. His name was Dr. Robert. Many people in the hospital respected him, and his confidence was clear in the way he spoke. "Next," he said loudly, calling a name from the list. Mary sat up, her heart filled with hope. Maybe now she would finally be seen. She raised her hand weakly and whispered, "Please, sir." "It's me, Mary. I've been waiting." Dr. Robert's eyes swept across the room. His gaze fell on Mary for a moment, but instead of walking toward her, he turned away and called another name. Mary lowered her hand slowly. Her chest tightened with disappointment. Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. She whispered under her breath, "Why didn't he take you?" The doctor continued to move through the room, speaking to other patients, asking questions and guiding them inside. Each time, Mary tried to catch his attention. Each time he walked past her as if she wasn't there. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each sound adding weight to Mary's suffering. She bent forward, clutching her stomach tighter, her breathing uneven. Emma rubbed her back, tears forming in her eyes. "This isn't right," Emma muttered. "I'll talk to him again." She stood and walked toward the doctor, who was writing on his clipboard near the desk. "Dr. Robert," she said firmly. "My friend is in terrible pain. She has been waiting for hours. Please see her now." Dr. Robert looked at Emma, then at Mary, sitting pale and shaking in the corner. His expression remained calm, but his words were cold. "She'll be seen when her turn comes. There are other patients as well." Emma's voice shook with anger. "But she is in worse condition than many others you already took in. Can't you see how much she's suffering?" The doctor simply nodded once and returned to his notes, ignoring her plea. Emma clenched her fists, but she knew arguing further would only waste more time. She hurried back to Mary. "Mary, hold on," Emma whispered. "Don't give up. I'll stay with you no matter what." Mary tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "I'm so tired, Emma. I feel like no one hears me." Emma hugged her gently. "I hear you, and I won't let them forget you." The waiting room grew colder as the night dragged on. Patients came and went. Families arrived, and some left with their loved ones already treated. But Mary remained in her chair, still unseen, still waiting. The television continued to play news headlines, and the receptionist tapped on her keyboard. The world seemed to move on while Mary's pain grew worse by the second. At one point, Mary tried to stand, thinking that maybe if she walked toward the desk, someone would notice. But as soon as she lifted herself, dizziness washed over her. Emma caught her just in time and lowered her back onto the chair. "Don't move," Emma whispered, her own voice breaking. I can't let you fall. Mary closed her eyes. She thought of her family, her dreams, her simple wish to live without pain. She wondered why life sometimes felt so unfair, why some voices were easily heard while others were silenced. The night seemed endless. Every tick of the clock was a reminder that she had been waiting too long. Every glance from Dr. Robert that passed her by was a reminder that she was invisible in his eyes. But what neither Mary nor Emma knew was that this night, this long and painful night, would soon change everything. It would not just change Mary's life. It would also change the doctor's career forever. The clock showed past midnight and the waiting room was quieter now. Some patients had gone home, some had been treated, but Mary was still there, leaning against Emma's shoulder. Her face looked weaker, and every few minutes a soft groan escaped her lips. Emma stroked her hand, whispering comfort, but inside she was full of fear. Emma looked around the room. Only a few people remained. She thought, maybe now it will be faster. Maybe now the doctor will finally see her. But when Dr. Robert walked out again, his steps were slow and his face calm, as if time meant nothing. He called out another name, and again it was not Mary's. Emma could not understand. She thought of all the times she had read about patients being ignored, but she never imagined she would see it with her own eyes. "Stay with me, Mary," she whispered. "I will not let you be forgotten." Mary's breathing grew heavier. She whispered back, "Emma, I feel like I'm fading. Please don't let me disappear like this." Emma's heart broke at those words. She stood quickly and walked again to the reception desk. "Please," she said to the nurse. "She can't wait any longer. Her pain is serious. Can't you tell the doctor again?" The nurse looked at Mary, then back at Emma. "I already told him. He decides who to see." Emma bit her lip. "But look at her. She might collapse." The nurse sighed but said nothing more. Emma returned to Mary, tears shining in her eyes. She sat down and held her hand tighter, silently promising she would not leave her side. Time moved slowly, like sand dripping through a glass. Each minute made Mary weaker. She tried to stay awake, but her eyelids were heavy. Emma tapped her hand gently whenever she saw her drifting. "Stay awake, Mary, please, just a little longer." Finally, another doctor entered the waiting room. His name was Dr. Michael, younger than Dr. Robert, with kind eyes that noticed details quickly. He glanced across the room and his eyes rested on Mary. He frowned. "Has she been seen?" he asked the nurse. The nurse shook her head. "Not yet. Dr. Robert is handling the list." Dr. Michael walked closer. He crouched near Mary and spoke softly. "Ma'am, how long have you been waiting?" Mary tried to answer, but her voice was only a whisper. Emma replied instead, her voice shaking. "More than 5 hours. She's been in terrible pain, but no one has helped her." Dr. Michael's eyes widened. He touched Mary's wrist, checking her pulse, then turned sharply toward the desk. "She needs to be seen now. Prepare a room immediately." Emma felt relief flood her chest. Finally, someone had noticed. But at the same time, anger rose inside her. Why did it take so long? Why had Dr. Robert ignored her for hours while her friend suffered? Mary was taken into an examination room with Emma walking beside her. The white walls felt colder than ever, but at least there was hope. Dr. Michael and 2 nurses began working quickly. They checked her vitals, gave her oxygen, and asked questions. Emma answered most of them because Mary was too weak to speak. She had stomach pain since yesterday. Tonight it became unbearable. She couldn't even stand. Dr. Michael nodded. "We'll run tests. This should have been done hours ago." His tone carried both anger and concern. Emma sat near Mary's bed, holding her hand as machines beeped softly around them. For the first time that night, Emma felt a little hope return. But outside the room in the hallway, Dr. Robert stood silently. He watched as nurses moved around as Dr. Michael gave instructions. His face showed no guilt, only a mask of calm control. But deep inside, cracks were forming in the image he built for himself. Back in the waiting room, whispers had begun. Patients who had seen Mary sitting for hours began talking among themselves. "She was waiting all night," one man said. "I saw her almost fall from the chair," another woman added, and the doctor kept calling others. Why would he ignore her like that? The whispers grew, small seeds of truth spreading in the air. Emma did not hear them, but the sound traveled through the hospital, carried from one patient to another. Hours later, Mary lay in bed, finally receiving treatment. Emma sat beside her, exhausted but unwilling to close her eyes. She kept thinking of how close they came to losing everything. Mary opened her eyes slowly and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Emma squeezed her hand gently. "You don't need to thank me. You deserved help from the beginning." Tears slipped down Mary's cheeks, not just from pain, but from the deep sadness of being unseen for so long. She thought of all the hours wasted in the waiting room, of the fear that she would never be noticed, never be helped. The memory cut her deeper than the illness itself. Meanwhile, Dr. Michael walked out of the room and went directly to the head nurse. "Why wasn't she seen earlier?" he asked firmly. The nurse lowered her voice. Dr. Robert didn't call her name. He kept moving her down the list. Dr. Michael's jaw tightened. That decision put her life at risk. "I will report this." The nurse nodded slowly, as if she too had been waiting for someone to finally say those words. By morning, the story had already begun to spread. Nurses spoke quietly in corners. Patients told their families what they witnessed, and some even recorded parts of the night on their phones. Small details turned into a bigger picture. Mary rested quietly in her bed, unaware of how much her experience was already changing the hospital around her. She only knew that Emma was by her side, holding her hand, promising her she was safe now. But in another room, Dr. Robert sat at his desk, staring at his clipboard. For the first time in years, he felt something heavy pressing on him. The silence of the hallway was louder than any words. He didn't know yet, but his choices that night were about to change his career forever. The morning light entered through the hospital windows, but for Mary, the night still lived inside her body. She lay weak on the bed, holding Emma's hand. The machines around her beeped softly, reminding her that she was still fighting. Emma sat beside her, tired but alert, her eyes fixed on every movement of the nurses. "Emma," Mary whispered, her voice soft like a fading song. "I thought I was going to die in that waiting room. I thought no one would ever notice me." Emma pressed her hand tightly. "Don't think about that now. You're safe. You're being treated. That's what matters." But deep inside, Emma could not let go of the truth. What had happened last night was wrong, and it was bigger than just Mary. If they stayed silent, the same thing could happen again to someone else. In the hallway, Dr. Michael spoke to the hospital director, Mr. David, a serious man in his 50s with years of experience in healthcare. "She was ignored for 5 hours, Dr. Michael said firmly. "Her condition could have worsened beyond saving." "This is unacceptable," Mr. David frowned. "And who was responsible for the delay?" "Dr. Robert," Michael answered without hesitation. "He passed her over again and again while treating others with less urgent conditions." The director sighed and rubbed his forehead. "This is serious. We will need a full report." By now, several nurses had also begun to share their side. They had seen Mary in pain. They had watched as she was skipped over. Some admitted they felt powerless to question Dr. Robert. But now that Dr. Michael had spoken, their courage grew. Meanwhile, outside the hospital room, a small group of patients who had witnessed the night's events gathered near the cafeteria. One man pulled out his phone and showed a short video he had taken of Mary nearly collapsing in the waiting room. Another patient added, "I saw the doctor walk right past her more than once." The whispers that began last night had turned into voices. The story was moving from one mouth to another, growing stronger with every retelling. Emma noticed some of this when she stepped out to get water. Two women near the hallway whispered, "That's her friend, the one who was waiting all night." Emma paused, realizing that the story was no longer just hers and Mary's. People were watching. People were speaking. Back inside the room, Mary opened her eyes again. She looked weaker than before, but her spirit had a quiet strength. "Emma," she said softly, what if we speak up? What if we tell them what happened?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, we must. We can't stay silent. Not after what you went through." At that moment, Dr. Michael entered the room. He checked Mary's condition, adjusted the IV drip, then looked at Emma seriously. "The hospital will investigate what happened, but it may take time. Would you be willing to share your experience?" Emma looked at Mary, then back at him. "Yes, we'll tell the truth," Dr. Michael nodded. "Good, because the truth must be heard." Meanwhile, Dr. Robert sat alone in his office. The walls around him felt heavier than usual. He had worked at the hospital for years, building a reputation of skill and authority. But now he could feel the ground shifting beneath him. He had seen the way Dr. Michael looked at him, the way nurses whispered when he passed. He tried to tell himself it was nothing. I followed procedure, he thought. I chose based on what I believed was urgent. But even as he told himself this, he remembered Mary's face, pale, sweating, desperate. He remembered her weak hand rising, her voice asking for help, and he remembered the choice he made to walk past her. His chest felt tight, but he pushed the thought away. I did nothing wrong, he whispered to himself. Yet his reflection in the office window seemed to disagree. In another part of the hospital, a young nurse named Sarah was talking to her colleague. I can't stop thinking about last night, she said. She could have died. And we all saw it, her colleague nodded. Someone has to tell the truth. This isn't just about one patient. It's about trust. By the afternoon, word had reached beyond the hospital walls. Families of patients were sharing what they had seen. A man posted on social media. I witnessed a woman ignored for hours in pain at the ER. Another doctor finally stepped in and saved her. This should never happen. The post quickly gathered attention. People began commenting, asking questions, expressing outrage. The story of Mary's suffering was no longer just within the hospital. It was spreading to the community outside. Emma noticed the shift when her phone began buzzing with messages. Friends asked if it was true, if Mary was okay. Emma replied briefly, confirming Mary was stable but explaining nothing in detail yet. She knew the full story would come soon, and it had to be told with care. Mary, lying in bed, whispered again, Emma, I don't want anyone else to feel invisible like I did. If my pain can open people's eyes, then maybe it wasn't for nothing. Emma kissed her forehead gently. Then we'll make sure your voice is heard. Meanwhile, the hospital director called Dr. Robert into his office. The air between them was heavy. Mr. David spoke firmly. There are reports about your conduct last night. Patients and staff have raised serious concerns. We need your statement. Dr. Robert sat stiffly. I followed medical judgment. I decided the order of treatment. But why was she left for more than 5 hours while others with less severe conditions were seen sooner? The director pressed. Dr. Robert hesitated. His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time, words failed him. An investigation will begin immediately, Mr. David said. Until then, you are under review. When Dr. Robert left the office, he felt smaller than ever. The whispers around the hospital seemed louder, the glances sharper. His carefully built career was no longer safe. Back in Mary's room, Emma helped her sit up slightly. Mary looked out the window, watching the daylight spread across the sky. Her body was weak, but her spirit was awakening. She remembered the long night in the waiting room, the silence, the fear of being forgotten. She remembered the cold face of Dr. Robert and the kind hand of Dr. Michael. She remembered the moment she almost gave up, and the moment hope returned. And she knew that this story was not ending here. It was only beginning. The truth had begun to spread. And once truth begins to spread, it cannot be stopped. The day after Mary's long night in the waiting room, the hospital felt different. It looked the same, bright white walls, busy hallways, and the constant sound of footsteps. But there was a change in the air. People were speaking in hushed voices, glancing at one another, their words carrying weight. Emma noticed this the moment she stepped out of Mary's room to get some fresh air. 2 nurses were standing by the vending machine, whispering. When they saw Emma pass, they stopped talking, their eyes following her. She realized then that Mary's story had spread further than she imagined. Inside the room, Mary rested against her pillow, her eyes half closed. She was still weak, but her breathing was steadier. When Emma returned, she smiled faintly. You look worried, Mary said softly. Emma sat beside her. People are talking, Mary. Everyone knows what happened last night. They know you were ignored. They know how long you waited. Mary closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of the hours of silence, the way her voice had gone unheard. Then she whispered, maybe that's good. Maybe they need to talk. Maybe it will stop this from happening again. Emma nodded. Yes, but it also means things are going to change. And change is never easy. That morning, the hospital director, Mr. David, called for a staff meeting. Doctors, nurses, and administrators gathered in a large conference room. The air was tense. Mr. David stood at the front, his voice steady. We have received multiple reports from staff and patients about a serious incident in the emergency department. A patient in severe pain was left waiting for more than 5 hours. This cannot be ignored. An internal review has started, and we will take appropriate action." There was silence in the room. Some staff lowered their eyes. Others exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Michael spoke from the side of the room. "With respect, sir, this was not just an unfortunate mistake. It was a choice. A patient's life was put at risk. We must not allow personal bias or poor judgment to decide who gets help." His words carried across the room like a bell. Several nurses nodded in agreement. At the back, Dr. Robert sat stiffly. His face was pale, but his jaw was tight. He said nothing. He could feel the weight of eyes on him, the whispers he had been hearing since morning. After the meeting, Dr. Robert walked quickly down the hallway. A young nurse, Sarah, passed him but did not greet him like she usually did. Another doctor looked at him, then turned away. For the first time in years, Robert felt isolated in the very place where he once carried authority. Meanwhile, Mary was slowly gaining strength. Emma stayed close, bringing her water and helping her sit up. When Dr. Michael entered to check on her, he smiled gently. "You are doing better," he said. "That is good to see." Mary nodded weakly. "Thank you for noticing me when no one else did." Dr. Michael's face softened. "It is my duty to notice. Every life matters. Don't ever believe otherwise." His words filled the room with warmth. Emma's eyes grew wet, but she blinked quickly, not wanting to cry in front of Mary. Later that afternoon, a local journalist arrived at the hospital. She had heard the story from one of the patients who had posted online. She requested to speak with the hospital director. Soon after, cameras were seen outside the hospital entrance. Emma noticed them when she went downstairs for coffee. She froze, unsure of what to think. When she returned to Mary's room, she explained everything. Mary's eyes widened. "They're here? Reporters?" Emma nodded. "Yes, people outside want to know what happened to you." Mary took a slow breath. "Emma, I don't want this to be about revenge. I don't want hate. I just want truth." "Do you think they'll listen if we tell the truth simply?" Emma squeezed her hand. "Yes, people listen when words come from the heart. And yours will." That evening, Mr. David entered Mary's room, his expression serious but respectful. "Mary," he said gently, "the media has learned about what happened. They may reach out to you. I want to prepare you. But please know the hospital will not silence you. You have the right to speak." Mary looked at him, surprised by his words. She saw sincerity in his eyes. She nodded slowly. "If I speak, I will only speak the truth," Emma whispered, "and I'll be by your side." Meanwhile, Dr. Robert sat in his office, staring at his desk. Papers lay untouched. For the first time, he felt the weight of his choices. He remembered Mary's hand lifting, her weak voice asking for help. He remembered turning away. A voice inside him whispered, "Why did you do it? Why didn't you listen?" But he pushed the thought down. He told himself he had followed procedure. He told himself it was nothing more. Yet deep down he knew the truth was heavier than any excuse. The next day, the hospital was filled with reporters. Patients and families spoke to them outside, sharing what they had seen. Some said they witnessed Mary waiting all night. Others described how Dr. Robert walked past her. Their words painted a picture that could not be ignored. Inside, Emma sat beside Mary as a journalist entered the room with permission. The reporter asked softly, "Mary, would you like to share your story?" Mary looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. Then Mary spoke. Her voice was calm but full of emotion. She told them about the pain, about the long hours of waiting, about feeling invisible. She spoke about how she thought she might die in that waiting room unseen. And she spoke of Emma's strength, who never stopped holding her hand. When she finished, the room was silent. The reporter lowered her pen and said, "Thank you, Mary. Your words will reach many people." That night, Mary's story appeared in newspapers and on television. People across the city read her words and felt her pain. Calls flooded the hospital demanding accountability. Emma sat beside Mary, holding her hand tightly as they watched the news on the small television in the room. Mary's pale face was on the screen, her words quoted in headlines. Emma whispered, "People are hearing you now, Mary. They're listening." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "I never wanted attention. I only wanted to be seen as human. But if my pain helps others be seen, then it is worth it." In another part of the hospital, Dr. Robert watched the same news report. His heart pounded as he saw Mary's face, heard her words, and felt the weight of public judgment pressing against him. His career, once untouchable, now trembled under the truth he could no longer hide from. The voices of patients, nurses, and witnesses had joined together, and those voices could not be silenced anymore. The morning sun shone over the city, but inside the hospital the atmosphere was heavy. The news had spread everywhere. Mary's face had appeared on television, her voice echoed in newspapers, and her story was on social media. People from different places were talking about her, sharing their feelings of sadness and anger. Emma woke up in the chair beside Mary's bed, her eyes tired but her heart steady. She looked at Mary, who was still resting. For the first time in days, Mary seemed to be sleeping peacefully. Emma smiled softly. "You're safe," she whispered. "And now the world knows what happened." Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, Dr. Robert walked through the hallway. His steps were slower than before, and his shoulders felt heavy. Nurses avoided his eyes, and even other doctors spoke to him briefly without warmth. He could hear whispers following him. "That's him," one nurse murmured to another. "He's the one who ignored her." Robert clenched his jaw and kept walking. For years he had been respected, even admired, but now the respect was gone. Every glance he received reminded him of his mistake, a mistake that could not be hidden anymore. Inside the hospital director's office, Mr. David sat with Dr. Michael and the head of nursing. Papers lay across the desk filled with witness statements and reports. Mr. David's expression was firm. "We cannot deny what happened. Too many people saw it. Too many voices have spoken. We must act," Dr. Michael nodded. "This was not only poor judgment. It endangered a patient's life. We must show that this hospital values every life equally." The head nurse agreed. "Staff are unsettled. They want to know that leadership will protect them if they speak up. If nothing is done, trust will break completely." Mr. David leaned back in his chair. "Then we will begin formal action against Dr. Robert. Suspension first until the board makes a decision." That afternoon, Dr. Robert was called to the office. He stood stiffly as Mr. David spoke. "Dr. Robert, due to serious concerns about your recent conduct, you are suspended from duty pending further investigation." Robert's face turned pale. "Suspended?" he repeated, almost in disbelief. "Yes," Mr. David said firmly. "You will not see patients until the board reviews this case." Robert wanted to argue, but his voice caught in his throat. He felt as if the walls of the office were closing in on him. Finally, he turned and walked out, his steps unsteady. For the first time in his career, he was powerless. Outside, staff noticed his pale face. The whispers grew louder. "He's suspended," someone said. The news traveled fast, and within hours everyone in the hospital knew. Back in Mary's room, Emma received the update from Dr. Michael. "The hospital has suspended him," he said gently. "It's only the first step, but it shows that your voice is being heard." Mary's eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "I never wanted to destroy anyone. I just wanted to be seen." Dr. Michael nodded. "And because you spoke, others will be seen too. Sometimes truth hurts, but it also heals." Emma held Mary's hand and smiled through her own tears. "You didn't just speak for yourself, Mary. You spoke for everyone who has ever felt invisible." In the following days, more people came forward. Some patients shared their past experiences with Dr. Robert. A few nurses admitted they had noticed similar behavior before but were too afraid to speak. Now, with Mary's story shining like a light, they found courage. One nurse said, "I once saw him dismiss a woman who said she was in pain. He told her to wait longer even though she could barely walk. I never forgot it." Another added, "I thought it was just me who noticed, but now I see it was real." Their testimonies built a larger case. What happened to Mary was not just one night. It was part of a pattern. Meanwhile, Mary's health slowly improved. Each day she sat up a little longer, smiled a little more, and found strength in knowing her pain had not been ignored anymore. Emma stayed close, reading her small stories, bringing her flowers, and filling the room with comfort. Sometimes Mary asked, "Do you think people will forget soon?" Emma shook her head. "No, your story has already changed things. Even if people forget the details, the truth will stay in their hearts." Outside the hospital, protests began quietly. A group of people gathered with signs that read, "Every life matters and justice for patients." They stood peacefully, asking for fairness in healthcare. News channels filmed them, and once again Mary's name was mentioned. Inside, Robert sat in his office for the last time. The silence around him was unbearable. He remembered the respect he once commanded, the way people used to greet him with smiles. Now there was only quiet, only shame. For hours he sat staring at the wall, asking himself the same question over and over. Why didn't I listen? Why didn't I help her? But no answer came. At the end of the week, the hospital board met. After reviewing all the testimonies, the reports, and the public pressure, they made their decision. Dr. Roberts' career at the hospital was over. He was dismissed from his position. When the announcement came, staff nodded silently. Some felt relief, some sadness, but most felt it was the right thing. Trust could not return unless action was taken. Emma heard the news first and gently shared it with Mary. It's over. He won't be working here anymore. Mary closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. Then maybe someone else will be seen and they won't have to suffer like I did. Emma hugged her tightly. Yes, Mary. Because of you, things will change. In the quiet of the hospital room, the two friends sat together hand in hand. Outside, the world moved with noise and news, but inside there was peace, the kind of peace that comes when truth finally finds its voice. Mary had entered the hospital as a patient unseen. But now she was more than that. She was a voice that could not be silenced, a reminder that every person deserves to be noticed, to be cared for, to be treated with dignity. And though Dr. Roberts' career had ended, Mary's story had only just begun. The hospital corridors no longer felt the same for Mary. When she was first brought in, she had been invisible to the people who should have helped her, but now every nurse, every doctor, and even patients looked at her differently. Some smiled with respect, others nodded quietly as if to say, we heard your story and we believe you. Mary was still weak, but her spirit was stronger than it had ever been. Each day she pushed herself to sit up, then to stand, then to walk a little farther. Emma was always by her side, encouraging her with gentle words. Step by step, Mary, she said. Your strength is coming back. Sometimes Mary doubted herself. She asked Emma, do you think I did the right thing by speaking out? I never wanted to hurt anyone's life. Emma held her hand tightly. Mary, you didn't cause this. The truth was already there. You only gave it a voice. If you had stayed silent, others might still be suffering in the shadows. You gave them light. Those words comforted Mary. Deep inside, she began to understand that her story was bigger than her own pain. It had opened eyes and touched hearts. The community responds outside the hospital. People continued to talk about Mary's experience. Local community groups invited her to speak, and though she was still healing, she agreed to attend a small gathering at a nearby church. When she walked into the hall, leaning slightly on Emma's arm, the room went quiet. Dozens of faces turned to her, full of kindness and admiration. Mary felt nervous. She had never spoken to a crowd before, but when she began, her voice was steady. I came here because I want to share something simple, she said. All I wanted that night was to be seen. I wanted someone to believe me when I said I was in pain, but instead I was made to wait. My voice was ignored and my body grew weaker. For hours I felt invisible. I don't want anyone else to feel that way. Her words carried across the room like soft music. Some people wiped their eyes. Others nodded in agreement. Mary continued, pain does not have color. Suffering does not have a face or a name. It is the same for all of us, and care should be the same too. We must remember that every life matters, every person deserves dignity. When she finished, the crowd stood and clapped. Some even came forward to thank her. One woman said, your story gave me courage. I've been afraid to speak about my own experience, but now I feel I can. Mary realized then that her voice was not just hers anymore. It was a bridge for others. The hospitals changed back at the hospital. Leadership knew they had to rebuild trust. Mr. David called a meeting of all staff. We failed one of our patients, he said honestly. And because of that failure, the world reminded us of what we should never forget. From now on, we will take new steps to make sure every patient is treated with the same care and respect. He announced new training sessions for doctors and nurses, focused on empathy, equality, and patient-centered care. He also created a new team whose role was to listen to patients' voices directly, ensuring no one would be ignored again. Some staff were uncertain at first, but over time, they saw the difference. Patients felt more comfortable. Nurses felt supported, and doctors began to listen more carefully. The shadow left by Dr. Roberts slowly faded, replaced by a culture of kindness and fairness. Dr. Robert's reflection. Far from the hospital, Dr. Robert lived in silence. His career had ended, and the respect he once carried was gone. But with the silence came reflection. Each day he thought about Mary, about the hours she sat in pain while he turned away. The memory haunted him. One evening he sat alone at his desk and whispered, "If I had listened, everything would be different." His eyes filled with tears. For the first time he understood the weight of his actions. His career was over, but the lesson would follow him for the rest of his life. Mary's healing weeks turned into months. Mary grew stronger. She walked on her own, laughed more, and even returned to her work. But she was not the same woman she had been before. Pain had changed her, but it had also given her strength she never knew she had. One day Emma found her sitting by the window, writing in a notebook. "What are you working on?" she asked. Mary smiled. "I'm writing my story. Not just what happened in the hospital, but everything I learned. I want others to read it, to know they are not alone." Emma's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful, Mary. Your words will reach even more people." Mary nodded. "If my story helps even one person feel seen, then it's worth it." A legacy of hope. Months later, Mary's story was published in a local magazine. The title was simple: "The Night I Fought to Be Seen." People from all over the state read it, shared it, and talked about it. Letters poured in, thanking her for her courage. One letter said, "Because of you, I spoke up at the hospital when no one was listening. And I finally got the help I needed. You saved me." Another said, "You reminded me that my life matters, no matter who I am. Thank you." Mary read each letter with tears in her eyes. She realized her pain had become a seed of hope for others. A final visit. Bright morning, Mary and Emma walked together to the hospital. Not as patients this time, but as guests. The hospital had created a new program called Voices of Patients, and Mary was invited to share her experience with the staff. As she stood in front of the group, her voice was calm but powerful. "I came here once feeling invisible," she said. "But today I stand here as a reminder. Patients trust you with their lives. That trust is the most valuable gift you will ever receive. Never ignore it. Never turn away." The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. Doctors, nurses, and staff felt the weight of her words. When she finished, there was no applause at first, only quiet reflection. Then slowly the room filled with clapping, not out of formality but out of deep respect. Peace at last. That evening, Mary and Emma sat together under the soft glow of the setting sun. The city lights twinkled in the distance, but around them there was calm. Mary whispered, "It feels like a new beginning. Not just for me, but for many others too." Emma smiled. "You turned pain into purpose, Mary. That's the most powerful thing anyone can do." Mary leaned back, closed her eyes, and let out a breath of peace. She had walked through darkness, been ignored in her time of need, and carried the weight of injustice. But in the end, she had found light. Her voice had broken the silence. Her story had changed lives. And though the night that nearly broke her would never be forgotten, it had also given birth to a truth that could not be silenced. Every person matters. Every life deserves care, and every voice must be heard.